Today we are going to walk through a beginner-friendly version of how to make a ruffled quilted heart tote. And this was actually, I think, the second project that I ever sewed, so it is so beginner-friendly and just an overall fun project. As far as materials, I did 3 different cotton fabrics that were cohesive, and I kind of went along with like the heart, love, Valentine's theme, so they're all a shade of pink. And then to make it quilted, I also used a little bit of cotton batting as well. Okay, and so because this heart tote does not have a pattern, you are going to have to create your own heart shape. My widest width was 15 inches across, and then the dip down of the heart to the bottom corner was 9 inches tall. I found that creating the heart shape to be a little bit wider than you would usually prefer makes the end result so much cuter. So just play around with your shape a little bit until you find the perfect look that you're going for. So now we're going to start cutting out, and the first thing I'm cutting out is the front fabric piece. And to speed up your cutting process, this would also be a good time to cut out the remaining heart pieces. So there will be 4 pieces total that are hearts when it comes to the cotton fabric. That's the 2 outside pieces and the 2 inner lining pieces. However, you will also have 2 cotton batting hearts as well. In this video, I actually cut out the hearts before putting my quilting lines on, as I'm showing you how I'm measuring them out now. However, if I were to make the same project today, I would definitely just quilt before cutting out the heart piece just to allow for shifting fabrics. So the process that I'm showing right now is using a Hera marker to make indents so that when I make my quilting lines, they're like as precise as possible. This is something you definitely don't have to do, and I typically don't do it anymore. This was just when I was more precise. However, I do have to note that it does usually look better in the end. So now we're going to take this stack of 1 cotton fabric and your cotton batting and quilt them together. So I'm just following all of the lines that I had marked with my Hera marker. You can also do any sort of pattern you want when it comes to quilting the stitches. I just chose like a simple, almost checkerboard style, but you can just do lines, you can do cute and intricate little stitches, whatever you want your bag to look like in the end. So this is what an outside piece should look like when you are finished quilting it, and then we're just going to repeat the same process so that we have it for the other outside as well, front and back. And as I mentioned earlier, I would definitely recommend doing all of your cuts right in the beginning just to save some time, but that is not what I did, so here's me cutting some more. So just like the front of the bag, we are going to do the exact same process with the back of the bag. Again, adding our quilting lines and sewing those down. And now our 2 outside pieces are finished. And not shown here are the 2 inner lining pieces that are also heart-shaped. So our next step is creating our ruffles. To find the perfect length for your ruffles, you are going to measure the perimeter of your heart, which might be different than mine, and you are going to double that. So this is going to end up being quite long, but that's because we are applying ruffles. I didn't have fabric that was quite long enough, so I just sewed 2 of the pieces together to make it double the length. The width of your ruffles is also up to you. I think I went with about 4 inches because folded in half, that gives you about 2 inches of ruffling. Okay, so now for actually preparing the ruffles, we're taking the super long strip and folding it in half so that there are 2 raw edges facing each other, and we're just pressing this down the whole way just to kind of create a base for when we add the stitch. Now there's 3 options you can do for creating your ruffles. The first and easiest is using a ruffle foot. At this point in time, I did not have one. So what I did here was significantly lower the tension and then use a long stitch length. And at the start of your stitch, be sure that you don't backstitch. Leave it open. And then comes the super tricky and tedious part where you hold one string that you'll be pulling, and with your other hand you're going to shift the fabric down, and this eventually creates a ruffle. It's definitely time consuming and you have to be super careful not to break your thread. And the third option for creating your ruffles is probably the easiest, and that's maxing out your tension to 9 and increasing your stitch length to 4, and your machine will essentially just create the ruffle for you. I just found that one out like a couple weeks ago. Otherwise, I would have definitely used it here. And for option 2, this is what your ruffles will end up looking like. So honestly, I do love the look of these, so it's just up to you how you want to get there. I ended up creating 2 different sets of ruffles so that I have one to go on the front cover and one on the back cover. Right now you can see I'm attaching them to the front with some clips, just so that I can sew it down a lot more easily. Now, when you are attaching the ruffles, I like to make sure that my stitch is slightly on the outside of the original stitch of the ruffles, just so that when you do flip it inside out, in the end, it will hide that original stitch. This part is definitely something you want to take your time with so that you don't like affect the shape of the heart. Keeping everything in line and as close to the edges as possible will make sure your shape stays as perfect as possible. Next up are the straps, and there's like a million different ways that you can approach straps, but I chose to do 2, and I folded them in half, sewed them inside out, and just left a little space so that I could flip it inside out. And then once they're the correct side out, I took an iron, ironed it down, and then I actually did add a stitch all along the edge just for some extra sturdiness. And I think if I could go back, I would have actually added cotton batting to the straps because I do like a strap that's a little more hardy and comfortable. I'm attaching the straps directly to the outside parts of the bag using a box X stitch. I think it's just kind of a cute and whimsical little way to attach the straps, especially for this project. So once our ruffles and our straps are ready to go, we are going to add the inner lining to each heart. So with each outside part facing each other, you're going to clip them down and then you'll just stitch all the way along the edge once again. For the easiest way to visualize this, make sure your batting is face up so you can see where you stitched the ruffle down and try to mimic that stitch almost as perfectly as you can. And if you have to, just make sure that you're covering up the stitch of the ruffle instead of being on the other side of it. And as you're stitching around, be sure to leave a little bit of a gap so that you can flip it inside out once that's done. Okay, so here I'm choosing to add a little quilted pocket. This is totally optional and it's just more of an aesthetic purpose. You can make it any size you want, but this is how I did it. So you'll have your quilted piece and the exact same size will be the inner lining piece. Again, you will sew it so that pretty sides are facing each other. Leave a tiny little gap so that you can flip it inside out at the end. And then you're ready to stitch it directly onto the outside or inside of the bag, whichever you choose. So now at this point, you should have both sides of the bag completely finished, and the only thing that's left is attaching them together. So here we have the back side, and then here is the front side, and they also both have ruffles, so it's kind of a double ruffle moment, which I'm loving. So you can essentially attach these in whatever fashion that you choose. The deer came out and I had to show you because I'm obsessed with them. Because it's so thick and because the ruffles and everything are a little bit hard to match up, I just decided to go for some hand stitching. So I'm doing it from the left curve to the right curve. And yeah, I'll just stitch that up and then now we have our heart tote. But if you guys made it this far, thank you so much for watching. This was a really fun project to kind of look back on because as I said in the beginning, this was one of the first projects I ever did. And I just think it's so fun and cute and whimsical. And yeah, I hope you guys really love it. And let me know if you have any questions about the process.